Well, hi, Sax Gourmet fans. This is Steve Goodson, and I'm speaking to you from our ultra top secret command and control bunker, Sax Gourmet World Headquarters, located in Sector R of the great city of New Orleans, the birthplace of jazz. And I want you to know that tonight's topic is about a skill I have, which, while not altogether unique to me, is something that you ought to have. And that skill is this. I can look at a saxophone, any kind of mouthpiece, doesn't have to be a saxophone mouthpiece. I can look at any saxophone mouthpiece and I can have a very, very good idea of what that mouthpiece is going to sound like when it's played. And, I could keep this to myself, but honestly, I worry about you guys. I do, because there are an awful lot of you guys out there spending big money for mouthpieces, and you don't have a clue what they're going to sound like. You don't. So I'm going to share some basic facts about mouthpiece design and how it ultimately impacts the sound with you. So the next time you're shopping online or you go down to the music store, you'll know what to look for to get the sound that you want. Now I want to emphasize that we're talking about getting the sound that you want. Your saxophone tone should be as distinctive as your speaking voice. I've got one of my private students sounds just like me, and it makes me crazy. It makes me crazy because the guy sounds like me, and he ought to sound like him. Well, the equipment that you choose is going to have a very significant impact on your ultimate sound. It's not everything, but it is important. And your equipment shouldn't fight you and prevent you from getting the kind of sound you want. So let's talk about this. Now, first, we need to understand clearly what is the function of the mouthpiece. Well, it's a noisemaker, or more technically, it's an oscillator. The mouthpiece lets the reed flap, and when the reed flaps, it makes an energy wave, and okay, I think we're back live again. So sorry about that. I think it's the Russians. What do you think? It's those pesky Ruskies. Well, anyway. So, hey, could somebody give me a thumbs up and let me know that we're back live? It looks like we're live to me. Donna, wave at me or something. Chad, come on, I can always count on you. But anyway, are we live? I think so. So, at any rate, we were talking about how the mouthpiece is an oscillator, and this oscillator generates an energy wave that goes through the neck and then ultimately through the horn. And when it does that, beautiful music comes out. Okay, hey, great, getting some likes. And you guys can share this too, by the way. I'd appreciate it if you would. So, what we want to understand is that our mouthpiece is kind of the first place that we can influence the shape of that wave. And what do we mean by the shape? Well, you can get the wave and to generate an electronic signal, and you can see all the ups and downs and the nodes and the antinodes and the overtones and the harmonics and all of that great stuff. And you'll find that if you change the way the mouthpiece is made, you can change the wave. So the first thing we want to talk about tonight is about the materials. And boy, are there a lot of different materials out there to make saxophone mouthpieces from. Now, the first saxophone mouthpieces were, I guess Adolph Sax whittled them with his pocket knife, were made of wood, and he used pear wood. Pear wood's a very nice quality wood. My company makes some wooden mouthpieces. Here's one of them right here. And this is made of the same kind of wood you make a high quality clarinet from. Is grenadilla. Now I know my good friend Arnold Montgomery has been making some mouthpieces out of, I don't know what all kind of woods those are. I know they're beautiful, and I know Arnold knows what he's doing. Anyway, they're different wood. I know that Gary Segal has made some wooden mouthpieces. Peter Ponsel has made some wooden mouthpieces. And I think my old pal Theo Wani has fooled around and made a wooden mouthpiece. But the thing I like about wood, and the reason we chose the wood we did to make mouthpieces, is I wanted to make a saxophone mouthpiece that sounded like a very high-end clarinet. Because I don't play clarinet particularly well, but I do love the way they sound. So it has a nice resonance to it. Now, later on, let's advance on in saxophone history to the late 1890s, and they began to use hard rubber. And this stuff is still very much in use today, and is something that has a sound all of its own. Now, there was also another material that you found around the turn of the 20th century, and it was called bakelite. It looks a lot like rubber, but it's not. It's a synthetic material. Now, I want to show you a trick. If somebody's trying to sell you a mouthpiece and they say, oh yeah, Steve, it's genuine hard rubber, well, then just do this. This is one of our Sax Gourmet mouthpieces. This is a Black Beauty, and I know for a fact that it's 100% hard rubber. Wet your finger, rub that mouthpiece until it gets hot. Till it gets hot. And when it gets hot, smell it. If it doesn't smell like rubber, somebody is trying to pull the wool over your eyes, so be careful. Now, there are a number of varieties of hard rubber because none of the rubber used in mouthpieces is 100% rubber. There are a lot of, well, you might as well say 11 different herbs and spices that are put in the rubber, and it's almost all, I guess the manufacturing process is the same for all of it, but they mix it all up and then they cook it under great atmospheric pressure, and it comes out in a rod, and you can machine that rod and get something that's really good sounding. The standard for many years was hard rubber, and that's what just about everybody used. And then along came metal. Well, most saxophone mouthpieces that are made out of metal, not all, but most, are made of brass. And then some neurotic at the back of the room is going to say, well, Steve, if I use brass, I'm going to get brass poisoning. Well, grow a pair, okay? But here's the thing. Brass, as is used in saxophone mouthpieces, is not the kind of brass that has lead in it, which is what gives it the poisoning. The brass that's used in saxophone mouthpieces is the same kind of brass that is used in church bells, and it's made of zinc and copper, and of course looks like this. We all know what that is, and you know, like a good quality church bell, you ought to be able to thump it with your finger and get a somewhat musical sound, and that's why brass has been so popular for so long. Now, there have been other metals used. One that's used sometime, not commonly seen. I think Peter Ponsel made some mouthpieces from aluminum at one time. I had one for a while, played pretty good, and seems like Gary Segal may have. And you know, aluminum has got some great musical characteristics. It's not commonly used for mouthpieces these days. I'm not real sure why. Maybe Gary or Theo Wani or one of these experts can tell me why. But another material that is sometimes seen used for mouthpieces, and this is best known from the Dukoff mouthpieces. Here's one now here from my personal collection. This thing is made from pewter, which is tin and I think lead. I don't even know what all goes in there. But at any rate, pewter is used still by the Dukoff company. I don't know anybody else using pewter right now. But let me tell you something about pewter. In my opinion, pewter is too soft. I've seen a lot of Dukoff mouthpieces, and they play great. But over time, it's so soft that they wear. So I'd get something a little more durable. Now, speaking of more durable, how can we get something that's more durable? Well, I'm going to tell you. And I got it right here. And you've all seen this from different people before. This is one of our models. This is a Saxophone Yellow Moon. But most people think of stainless steel mouthpieces as Berg Larsens. And Mr. Larsen, many years ago, I think really started the trend in making good quality saxophone mouthpieces out of stainless steel. Stainless steel is hard. It's very difficult to face, but boy, once you get it faced, stainless steel is forever. Did you hear me? It's forever. Also, it has a very different sound than brass or hard rubber or anything else. Stainless steel mouthpieces have a very distinct sound, and that's why we choose to offer one. It's a good thing. Maybe not for everybody, but a very good thing. So, now let's talk about a couple of other materials that are used. One of them that you rarely see, and I'm going to tell you why, is glass. Now, there is a company in Italy that makes a glass mouthpiece, and I've owned several of them. Now, look, those things play very good. Ones I've had 2 altos and a tenor, I think. And those things play really good. But here's the problem. They don't bounce. You drop one and that's it, because it's crystal. You know, just like that expensive stuff that your mama's got, you know, that she gets out on Thanksgiving and other holidays, you know, that expensive stuff that you can thump with your finger and get a nice musical note. At any rate, crystal mouthpieces don't bounce. So you drop them and there goes the tip and they'll shatter. Another thing is, they are the way they come to you. If you do know how to reface mouthpieces, which I do, and you try to reface a crystal mouthpiece, well, you better pack a lunch, because you're going to be there all day. That stuff doesn't cut easily. It's even harder to cut than stainless steel, and there are a lot of mouthpiece refacers who won't reface a stainless steel mouthpiece because they're so hard. These guys will work on brass or pewter or hard rubber or some of the other materials, sure, but they won't work on stainless steel, and they definitely won't work on crystal. And don't you guys forget, you can like this program and you can share it, and I would appreciate it if you would. Now, something that's very common is plastic mouthpieces, and a lot of new saxophones come with a plastic mouthpiece. The worst ones are made of polystyrene, and that stuff is very heat sensitive, it's not stable, and it's terrible. The better ones are made of polycarbonate, and I've got one right here. This is a polycarbonate mouthpiece. This may look familiar to some of you. This is an exact copy of a Selmer mouthpiece that is made I'm sitting here in New Orleans. Let me just say this was made across the great waters to the west. This thing plays just like a Selmer mouthpiece. Doesn't sound quite like it because the Selmer mouthpiece like this is hard rubber, and this is polycarbonate. But polycarbonate is a good material. It's very stable. It's somewhat hard, and I don't know if you can see on this. It's got some tooling marks on the table. This thing was actually cut on a milling machine, and it's pretty much dead flat. And you can buy all of those you want over there if you buy them 100 at a time for $2 a piece, FOB Shanghai. And, that's all right. Now, one of my very favorite mouthpiece materials, one of my very favorites, is acrylic. And I got turned on to this when I was trying to learn a thing or two from the great Sandy Runyon. And Sandy forgot more about mouthpieces than any of us mere mortals are ever going to know. And I've got here in my collection a Runyon. This is a Runyon Custom is what this model is called. A lot of people just refer to these as the Red Runyon. But I would go up to the factory and hang out with Mr. Runyon and Leroy, the plant manager, and Gervis, the superintendent, and all those other great people up at Runyon. And when it came time to mix up a batch of the acrylic, then Mr. Runyon and Leroy would go back in the room and close the door. And nobody was ever allowed to see them mix up that acrylic. It's the stuff they make it from is little pellets of different materials, because they had their own recipe, and they weren't going to tell me, and they weren't going to tell anybody else. And at any rate, acrylic has a wonderful, wonderful, rich, and very complex resonance characteristic that is just great for saxophone mouthpieces, and the Runyon Company used them for many, many years. I don't know whether or not they still make any acrylic mouthpieces. I just don't know. I hope they do, because it really sounds good. Now, while I was learning from Mr. Runyon introduced me to a material I was unfamiliar with that we have come along in our company and started using extensively. And I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to convert most of our mouthpiece line over time, not going to happen next week, to Delrin. Delrin is a synthetic material. It's a polymer. It's not a plastic. And Delrin, I'll talk about the musical characteristics in a minute, but Delrin is not heat sensitive. So you can machine it just like you do metal. And on top of that, Delrin is incredibly stable. So once you put a curve on it or cut something in the chamber, Delrin is forever. This is one of our Delrin mouthpieces. This is a Saxophone Dragon Tongue. This is my personal one. See, it's got white stripes on it. The ones we sell to the customers have black stripes. That way I'm not going to let anybody get my baby and walk out of here with it. Because for some reason, every time people come see me, it's always, I want to play your mouthpiece. But here's the thing we found out about Delrin, and we did some real scientific research on this. And we found, by looking at the spectrums, that Delrin had, we thought, superior resonance characteristics. It was quicker to respond and more responsive, and it had a broader dynamic range than even the finest hard rubber. Did you hear me? Even the finest hard rubber. And you can machine the stuff extremely precisely, just like metal. So what's not to like? We have our Delrin mouthpieces made for us by a company in Phoenix, Arizona. The name of the company is EMR Machine. They're in Phoenix, Arizona. They are an extraordinarily high-tech company. They make all kind of great stuff for militaries all over the world, and they've got 5-axis CNC machines, and they tell me that those machines will cut accurately down to a 10,000th of an inch. And that's what we make our Delrin mouthpieces on right now, and that's what we're going to make them on in the future. There are a couple other materials that are occasionally used for mouthpieces. I know copper is one of them. I've seen a couple of solid silver mouthpieces. In my opinion, now I think copper has great resonance characteristics, but it's too soft. It's just too soft to make a mouthpiece out of and expect it to last. So, materials, every material sounds different. So first, we got to choose the material. Now, let's talk about something that you guys don't understand, and you guys talk about all the time. I'm on the internet all day, every day, and I hear all this yeah about tip opening. Okay, tip opening is important, okay? Tip openings have an influence on how the mouthpiece responds, and to a degree, a small degree, tip openings influence how the mouthpiece sounds. Now, look, I have people call me or email me every day and say, Steve, I want to get one of your mouthpieces and I want a 7, like my Auto Link 7. Well, you know, okay, I know what that is, but the tip opening system, the number system, you know, a Link 7 or a Meyer 7 or a Jody Jazz system or something like that, doesn't exist. It's not standardized. Every company's got their own system. So the only thing that matters is to get out your digital caliper and actually measure the tip opening and get a number and write it down. We use, because I'm in Louisiana, we use the American system, or the English system of inches, or actually thousandths of an inch when it comes to measuring tip openings. In other parts of the world, I guess the rest of the civilized world, they use millimeters or fractions thereof. But the numbers, 7 stars, 9 stars, all that, they don't mean nothing. The only thing that matters is what that digital caliper says. Now let's talk about small tip openings or closed ones versus large ones. If you have a large tip opening, that reed is going to be able to flap in a wider arc. And if it flaps in a wider arc, it is potentially louder because you're making a bigger energy wave. Closed mouthpiece tip, shorter arc, okay. Now, then why doesn't everybody play a a wide open tip? Because they're hard to control, that's why. And you got to have Godzilla chops to control some of the things that you got to have. Now, I got to tell you this story. When I was studying with Mr. Runyon, he was kind enough to kind of give me the run of the factory, and he would hand face mouthpieces for me, and I could go down to the factory and get anything I wanted. So, I told Mr. Runyon, Mr. Runyon, I want a tenor mouthpiece that's I want that thing to be 165 thousandths open. And Mr. Runyon says, well, okay, we can do that, because they could do anything. So Mr. Runyon called down there, and he had Leroy cut a blank just like that. And then he told Leroy, he said, now before you give this to Steve, stamp it number 17, because that's what it is. And I've still got that mouthpiece, as a matter of fact. Now, remember that the more extreme you're facing and your tip opening and your curves, and we're going to talk about curves in just a minute, are then the harder they're going to be to control. So since they're going to be hard to control, then you're going to have to practice more. Now, wait a minute. Good brother Chad Taylor's up there in Chicago. I know he's got some good liquor in his hand right now. He said, does the type of facing curve change the feel of the tip opening? Chad, you are getting ahead of the lesson. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But yes, it does. Because the curve itself should be have a relationship to the amount of tip opening. In other words, every tip opening is not going to have exactly the same curve. How could it be and get good results? So I guess it's time to start talking about those facing curves, and this may be the least understood aspect of mouthpiece design. And one of the greatest repairmen on the planet, Ryan Walker, just says he likes talking about curves. I do too, particularly when they own women, young women with curves, and mouthpieces too. So at any rate, one of the things you got to know if you're going to shop for a mouthpiece is what is the length of the curve. Now, what in the world are we talking about? If you look at this thing sideways, you can see that if the reed is straight, there's going to be a point at which the tip of the mouthpiece curves up away from the reed. And you can get in here and measure and determine where that break point is, and that is the length of the facing. Now, listen to me. If you have a longer facing curve, and let's use a tenor, for example, and I'm going to use the arbitrary numbers on the standard mouthpiece gauge. Don't ask about this. I'll cover this in a future lesson. But most tenor mouthpieces run 48 on a standard mouthpiece gauge, okay? If you make a mouthpiece and it's got a curve that's 52 long, and we do make some that are long like that, that mouthpiece is going to make the lower notes easier to produce. Well, why doesn't everybody do that? That's because, you know, there's no free lunch in this world, and it makes them easier to produce, yes, but at the expense of the upper notes, okay? So you got to find out what's working for you, and, adjust accordingly. And if you get a mouthpiece that's got a curve that's 48 on a standard gauge, you can have that changed. There are people like me that'll do that. It's relatively easy to do. Now, if a long curve makes the lower notes easy to produce, what about a short curve? Well, it's just the opposite. It's going to make the upper notes easier to produce, and also it's going to help the altissimo to a degree. Now, Russ, we're going to talk about resistance. You just be patient. You be patient, Russ. We're going to talk about it. Now, when I was young and stupid in the 70s, I was using a Berg Larsen 140 over 0. That means that mouthpiece was 140 thousandths open. It had the smallest chamber Berg Larsen made, and it was an SMS, or a French curve. And the French curve, or short curve, is very short and it's hard to blow. Or I found it hard to blow. And stupid me, because in the 70s I did a lot of stuff I'm ashamed of, and I had a lot of fun though. Got some great stories to tell in the nursing home. But a short curve, most people will play with a reed that has a very unique profile if they know what they're doing. Stupid me, I was using a regular Rico number 5, and sometimes I'd clip them a little bit to make them harder. Well, that's because I'm a knucklehead. I was young and stupid then, I freely admit it. So you got to find a curve that works for you and what you want to accomplish. Now, here's something that none of you guys know. None of you know, and I try to drill this into my students. The curve of your mouthpiece must correlate to the profile of the reed you're using. And every brand of reed has a different profile. Just put several different brands side by side and look at them, and you will see that those different reeds. A Van Doren Blue Box gonna have a vamp that's steep like this, and a Rico Royal's gonna be like this, and a Laveau's has got a very gentle slope to it, but it has a thick tip, and a Hempke has a very thin tip and a shallow vamp. They're all over the place, but your reed and your curve have got to correlate. The closer they are to, holding hands, the better results you're going to get. Now, this brings us to how do we define the curve? Well, the way it's done is we got a glass gauge and we use old-fashioned feelers, and we measure different points and we plot them on a piece of paper and we see what that curve looks like. And on my mouthpieces that I make all of mine with what we call a pure radial curve. In other words, it's part of the arc of a circle, okay? Because I want that reed that I'm going to be using to wrap right around that thing just as pretty as you please, because I don't like any resistance. Now, some people make a curve that's not even, I didn't mean it has a kink in it, because it's still a curve, but it's an elliptical type of curve, and that is my good friend from China, Fabian, thank you, I love you, you're doing a wonderful job. But that curve is so important, and you can have a curve that is not part of the arc of a circle and still get good results, but it's going to favor some notes. So match your reeds to your curves. That's very, very important. You'll be, try different. If you've got a mouthpiece you like, try different brands of reeds with it. Don't stick to just the same old, or what the guy sitting next to you on the gig's playing. Try some different stuff. You'll be amazed at how much it might change your life. Okay, so we know what our facing curve is going to look like. We know what materials we're going to make our mouthpiece from. Now, let's talk about something that all you guys are wrong about, all you guys misunderstand about, and that's about baffles. Now, technically, a baffle, here it's easy to see on the back of this one. The baffle is just that area right behind the tip rail, okay? And here on this mouthpiece, and on most of our mouthpiece, you see that little indentation right there? We call that the lake, because it's like a little lake right there behind the tip rail. Now, the baffle, the way it's commonly taught when the band's sitting at the bar after the gig and they talking about, boy, you sounded good on that mouthpiece, is this whole gizmo right here. And this particular mouthpiece, which is a Saxophone Delrin Super Duck, has got a long, straight baffle going back here once we get past the lake, and it ends in a cliff going into the tone chamber. Well, what does that allow me to do? It allows me to shape that energy wave. Remember, that's all we're trying to control is the energy wave. I could care less about the airstream. I'm only concerned about the energy wave, because that's what makes the music. The air don't do nothing. But the energy wave, this allows me to somewhat compress it and favor certain things, but then I have a nice, in this mouthpiece, a nice big chamber, and that big chamber keeps it from sounding too thin and too harsh. Now, back in the old court, they used to make most of the mouthpieces like this, and it's got, this mouthpiece has got a very, very low baffle. In other words, the distance between the reed and the top of the mouthpiece is very significant, and that'll give you a round, mellow sound. And this is very much favored by classical musicians, a lot of jazz musicians. Here, you can look down in there and see on this one. This one's got round walls and all that. Casey Light plays this mouthpiece. This is Saxophone hard rubber, and it is fat and round sounding. So They're all different kind of baffles, and I'm going to show you several different ones. Here is another one with a long cleft baffle and entering into a big chamber. Here is one. This is one of mine. This was a special baby. This one has a very, very high area right behind here with a good sized leg, but then a very, very low baffle and big chamber. This is where, when I want to try to sound like Ben Webster, which I've been trying to do all my life, sounds like. Now, here's something really crazy, and I want to tell you right now, I don't do drugs, and I wasn't on drugs when I designed this, but look here at this. This is a Sax Gourmet Rottweiler. This is the most aggressive mouthpiece on the face of the planet, and it's got a long, straight baffle leading into this big old chamber, and the chamber is elliptical and this huge window. We're going to talk about windows in a few minutes. If you really get irritated with that guitar slinger that has a Stratocaster and a double Marshall stack, you go after one of these. This mouthpiece here, this is another very popular one, and this is another one that, no, I wasn't crazy when I did this. This has a super high baffle right here behind the tip, leading into this bullet chamber, which is big. And boy, this thing is fat, and it's also very loud. And when I was playing gigs, I'd come into the gig with one of those. I'd say, "Oh hell, Steve brought the cannon tonight. He gonna hurt us," and we would. Now, you can put any type of baffle in any kind of mouthpiece. Don't let people say, well, you can only put a high baffle in a metal mouthpiece. It doesn't work well in hard rubber mouthpieces. Don't listen to that. There goes a bunch of mouthpieces on the floor. Here's one. Here's a hard rubber mouthpiece, and look, it's got a high cleft baffle in it. Works real good. Now, here's another mouthpiece, and this is one of my favorites too. Oh yeah, looking at it kind of sideways, you can see this one's got a baffle that come down, and then it's got a little kink in it. And this is, it's almost like a dog leg is what we say in the South. But this is a compound baffle, and also, once again, this is one of my designs, but it works very well, and it leads into a large chamber, because I don't want a mouthpiece. I don't like these little tiny chambers in mouthpieces. They sound too thin. Here's another mouthpiece from my collection. This is a Runyon high baffle, bullet chamber. That's a really good mouthpiece. So the amount of baffle you have, the more baffle you have, the brighter the mouthpiece. The less baffle you have, the darker it's going to be. And once again, I think you ought to try to meet in the middle. Now, I want to show you something else. Let's see, let me find it. That mouthpiece has got it. And I got it out to show you. Here. Is that it? No, that's not it. I've got somewhere in here, I got a mouthpiece that's got a removable baffle. And, that's like owning a car with a convertible top. Not you, but here. This has got something like this. I got one of mine in here somewhere. I must have left it in my office. But this mouthpiece here, this is that red Runyon again. And this guy has, now Runyon called this, and they had the patent on this. Patent's expired now. But this was a secondary reed. But this black part, when you push it in there, and you just push it in there on finger pressure, and suddenly you got a lot higher baffle. And the secondary reed, Mr. Runyon used to talk about how it was like a supercharger, and it would amplify that wave as it ran through the mouthpiece. It does. And then this additional height made the mouthpiece a little blacker, a little brighter. And that can be a good thing depending on the situation. So we make for customers from time to time removable baffles, and when we do that, you know, you can have up to a point as much. I'll make you as big a baffle as you want. Too much baffle might make it hard to control, and if you have too much baffle and you get into the tone chamber, you're going to alter the pitch of your saxophone, because the pitch of your saxophone to a large degree is set by the size of the tone chamber of your mouthpiece. Did you hear me? Here's why. Think about your saxophone neck. Your saxophone neck, let's straighten it out, okay? And so it's just a straight cone. Now I'm going to tell you right now that a properly designed saxophone neck, and I know how to do that, is not a pure cone, okay? It's going to do sort of like, well, I'm not going to show you exactly, but it's a truncated cone. In other words, it doesn't come to a point. The end of it's cut off. Now, see here, let's look at this. And hey, Fabian made this neck for me. Yeah, look at this. Well, I've modified it some, but the end of the neck doesn't come to a point. Now, here's the thing. I slept through high school geometry. I freely admit that. But one day in geometry class, they talked about truncated cones, and the teacher taught the class how you could calculate that missing portion of the cone. So we're going to look up that formula, and we're going to make that calculation of what that missing section is. We're going to write that number down. And then we're going to take our mouthpiece, and the way I do it is I put some putty in here and close it off and close off this, and I fill the chamber with water, and then I pour the water out and measure that. So I then know what the volume of the chamber is, and I write that number down. The further apart those two numbers are, the worse the intonation is going to be on your saxophone. You better listen to that, because that's the way the laws of physics in this universe work. And you can't get around the laws of physics in this universe. So here's the deal. You got to have a chamber that works with your saxophone. And that's why some mouthpieces are never going to work with all saxophones. You know, they're not. Particularly small mouthpiece chambers, like on Dukoff Super Power Chamber, and on some of ours too, the Florida and a couple others. They don't work as well on very old saxophones. Those ones need a mouthpiece with a big old chamber, because you got to get the math right. Now, a small chamber is going to favor the upper notes, and a small chamber is also going to be brighter sounding. A medium chamber is going to be kind of middle of the road, not too bright, not too dark. Yeah, Chad, like a old con and a guardala. You right, brother. But and then a large chamber is going to give you a big, fat, dark sound, but it might not work as well with modern saxophones. Now, there's more to it than that, boys and girls. Let's look down the business end of this mouthpiece. This is one of my personal mouthpieces. This is one of, this one's got, you see, big old round chamber and no obstruction. Ooh. This is my personal lowrider Barry mouthpiece, and this will peel paint at 30 paces and is loud. But a round chamber is going to give you all of the spectrum. It's going to let all of the partials develop. If you get a chamber with flat side walls, that one doesn't show real well. We got one in here somewhere that got flat walls, but just take my word for it. Some of them got flat walls, some of them have round walls. The flat ones are going to favor, they're going to be a little bit too bright. Now, here's another thing, and I learned this from Dave Wardell. Now, Dave didn't want to tell me about this, but I looked up his patents, which have now expired, and of course Dave's, I don't know where Dave is now, he's not in the business. But one of the things Dave did, I don't know where he learned to do this, but it works, is he made the chambers of his mouthpieces elliptical. Elliptical? Yeah. Those mouthpieces don't have perfectly round chambers till you get to the shank. And what's the advantage of that? It allows those waves to develop just a little more and gives you a broader spectrum. Do we use elliptical chambers? You better believe we do. Now, here's another thing. Let's go back to that 8th grade science class that I also slept through. Now, the teacher was talking about sound waves, radio waves, all that good stuff. And the teacher was talking about how to wave, that they do this, up and down, node, antinode, and all that good stuff. Well, the shorter waves, they're moving right on like this, but those long waves need some space to develop. And if you disrupt that long wave, see, you've got a greater length to cause some destruction over, you better allow for that and try to make those long waves as stable as possible. Now think about this. Have you ever picked up your saxophone and tried to play a low C or low B? Those are the most difficult notes. And you get blah, 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 and it sounds like an old-fashioned motorboat? Yeah, sure you have. Why is that? Well, it's not because you got leaks in your horn or the reed's bad or any of that, probably. The main reason is somehow you've allowed that long wave to become disrupted. That's not good. So what can you do about this? And Wolf Tannenbaum taught me this trick. He was Wolf Tane. Wolf was also a student of Sandy Runyon's, and Wolfie used to tell me stories about Mr. Runyon when Mr. Runyon was the band director of the Chicago Theater, which was the biggest vaudeville house in the country in the 1920s, and about all the chorus girls Mr. Runyon would go out with. Wolf had a million stories. But anyway, if you look down in this one, let me get it just right, where we get the light right. Can we get the light right? Can you see? It's threaded. Can you see the threads in that mouthpiece, in that tone chamber? Let's try a different color and see what we can see. Yeah. See how the chamber's threaded? What does that do? That stabilizes the wave. How does it do that? Well, everybody that plays golf, raise your hand. Oh, okay. Why does a golf ball have dimples? Everybody knows. Oh, you don't know. Okay. Golf ball has dimples, so when it spins through the air, it creates a little area of turbulence around the exterior of the ball, and that turbulence acts as a lubricant, and it makes the ball fly farther and straighter. Now, if I could create a slight layer of turbulence in the inside of the chamber, I could make that long wave flow through the air, that turbulent air. Remember, air doesn't matter. I'm only concerned about getting that wave through there. But I could get the wave through there, and sure enough, it'll go straight, and you'll play your low notes better. No, Ryan, mini golf does not count. Unless, it's got a windmill and some dragons and all that. That's on kind of counts. So anyway, you can thread your chamber and, you can get better results. And I'll show you another trick. Once again, Fabian, thank you. Oh, look, the inside of the tendon of my neck, that's where the node low B occurs. Stabilize the no notes. All right, here's one of the greatest things Mr. Runyon ever taught me. Now, most mouthpieces that we see are shaped somewhat like this, right? That's familiar to us one and all. Some of us that play metal mouthpieces that they shape somewhat like this, and that's familiar to all of God's children. Now, let me tell you something. If you'll get your mouthpiece, and you will, here's the one I want to show you. If you'll shape the beak of the mouthpiece like that, or like, let me find that other mouthpiece that I want to show you. Yeah. Oh, there's that removable baffle. Where is that thing? Oh, well, here. You can see on this, but really, sure enough, on that. What does that do? If you'll make the beak of the mouthpiece thinner, if you make it thinner, it'll resonate better, and it'll give you more bite and projection. Also, another very important aspect of that is the way that beak interacts with your mouth is going to be different. And this is going to give me the opportunity to have a different mouth position that is actually preferable for keeping my throat in that O position. You know, we want to say O, not E, with our throat, and boy, that'll be very good. So you want, to get maximum projection, you want to get a thin beak and also that pronounced duckbill shape, if at all possible. Now, here's something that's very, very important that when you guys are getting your mouthpieces worked on, or you're buying mouthpieces, you don't pay attention to, and that is the table itself. And the table is this portion right here where the reed lies, okay? First, that section has got to be dead flat. Now, I'm not talking about sort of flat. I'm talking about dead flat, absolutely flat. And when we have another session about mouthpiece facing and all that, I'll show you how to do that. But right underneath the table, and let's look at this guy. Ooh-wee. At this point right here where the table starts, with this, you could shave with that. That's so sharp. You could. If you have a high vertical spot there, what is that going to do? That's going to cause resistance. And that, do we want resistance in that, to that wave? Of course not. Do we want to deflect it in any way? Of course not. But there's still people out there that are making mouthpieces that have got sort of a thick area there where the table and the chamber join. Sharp as a razor, bud. That's the only way to do it. Now, between the table and the tip wall, there's a thing called the window. And now, I'm going to defer to my very good friend and somebody I admire greatly, Jody Espina, the maker of the Jody Jazz mouthpieces, which are outstanding. And I'm going to say that Jody believes, and I didn't say he was wrong now, I didn't say he was wrong, but Jody believes that you can change the shape of this window here and it have an influence on the way the mouthpiece plays. Jody may very well know something I don't. Jody gets into some very complex mathematics and all that, and I didn't say he was wrong. We don't make a mouthpiece like that, but here's what we do. We make, look at the size of the window on that. But if you think that's a very manly window, what about that on an alto mouthpiece? Ooh-wee. The bigger the window, the louder the mouthpiece. And if you see, if you look at different mouthpieces, including different mouthpieces that we make, you're going to see that, like for example, this model here, this one's got a square window. Why? I don't know. I guess I was in a square window mood that day. The shape of the window doesn't have anything to do with anything. Size, very important. shape, doesn't matter. Okay, now, here's another couple of things that you need to understand about having, when you're buying mouthpieces, that you better do. And here, let's just take this lowrider Barry mouthpiece. You want to have a nice thin tip rail and nice thin straight side rails. If you do, your mouthpiece will articulate even better, even quicker. But they're also harder to control. And it's just like those big tip openings that we talked about. You know, maybe that's not, you know, such a good thing for everybody. Maybe make you have to go practice some more. Sure. In the perfect world, everybody would be able to play mouthpieces with very thin rails, and both on the tip and the side. Make sure the rails are even. That's most important. Now, a couple of you guys, my good man Russ Palladino in particular, have been after me about resistance. Now, I know that there's some people that like little blowing resistance, and Russ says that he's one of them. And I think that's all well and good. I don't understand why in the hell you would want your mouthpiece to be hard to blow. I'm talking about being built inherently into the mouthpiece to make it difficult to blow. You want it harder to blow, go buy a stiffer reed. This is a no-brainer. But don't paint yourself into a corner getting a mouthpiece that's hard to blow. It's my belief that your mouthpiece ought to offer absolutely no blowing resistance. Did you hear me? None. Zero. If you do that, then you can adjust the amount of resistance you want with the profile of the reed, strength of the reed, stuff like that, but you're not painted into a corner. So, some people make mouthpieces that even have, and I don't have one here because I wouldn't have one here in my house. They have like a washer at the end of the chamber to add some more resistance. Okay, in my opinion, that's a dumb idea. But not everybody listens to me, and not everybody believes everything I do. I think your mouthpiece ought to be absolutely free blowing. So, that's about it. One other thing that we've done a lot of work in, and this is something that I also learned from Wolfie Tannenbaum a long time ago, and have taken it a few steps further. Now look at this. This is a Saxophone Super Duck, as it says Super Duck, but Super Duck has got this thing. Oh, wait a minute. Comes right off. Yeah. And it might, well, here I've already got plenty of junk jewelry on, but it makes a real good rock and roll ring too. And so, at any rate, I can buy one of these mouthpieces, and I play it with the weight, or I can play it without the weight. And it's like buying two mouthpieces, because adding some mass at the end of the mouthpiece, on the shank, is going to give it a completely different sound. And here's another one that this is the heaviest tenor mouthpiece on the market right now, because all of this is solid metal back here. And you get in one of them barroom brawls, run your handkerchief through this and swing it around like that, you kill somebody with it. But at any rate, if you'll add a removable weight like that, you'll be amazed at the great results you can get, and have two different things. Now, I want to also tell you, and this doesn't have anything to do with mouthpieces, but my good friend and business associate, Eric Satterley, has been doing some great things with weights that you put on the bell to body brace. Man, it's changed my life. It's a great thing. Get them for your arm. high mass neck screws, and there's more, but I'm not going to tell you about it yet because his patents are still pending on those. But you can do a lot with mass at different specific points on the saxophone, and you know, you can certainly do that with mouthpieces. So that's about all I have with all of this information, and y'all gonna have to go back and watch this several times because we cover an awful lot of material. You ought to be able to now order a mouthpiece and kind of halfway know what to expect when it gets there. This is very important because most of you guys can't do that. I'm sure that a lot of you are going to have questions. And if you do, you can call me. My phone number is there on my nationofmusic.com site. I don't answer the phone when the company is closed. So call only during business hours. Or even better, you can email me at saxgourmet at cox.net. Now, all the email questions, and we get a lot of them. I mean, there's some days I get 300 emails. All those go to my wife Sharon first, and so Sharon kind of filters and censors all those things. Now listen, Sharon's a very nice woman, you know, and so don't put anything weird in your email. Always be nice. She's a 6 foot tall redhead, and you'll suffer accordingly if you put anything weird or out of line in there. So, at any rate, just email us your questions, and we try to answer all the emails every day. So, that's all I got to say today. It's time to go have a drink of Booker's Bourbon. If you're a bourbon drinker, I'm telling you, that's the best bourbon on the planet. But I'm tired. It's been a long day. And I want all of you to remember to practice long tones every day. And remember, keep your reed wet. This is Steve Goodson from Sax Gourmet World Headquarters. I'm down in the Command and Control bunker in Sector R telling you good night.